In this lecture, we will be talking about how to integrate third-party code into your application. First, we're going to talk about why you want to use third-party code in the first place. Then we will look into tools that make it easier to integrate that code into your apps. So why do you want to use third-party code? In general, a lot of problems that you want to resolve already have been solved by other developers. The iOS developer community is pretty huge, and platforms like GitHub have made it easy to share code between developers. In general, before implementing any complex feature, you should spend a few minutes researching if a library is already available that solves your problem. Another good reason to use a library can be an easier to use version of Apple's APIs. In some cases, for your specific use case, Apple's APIs are not perfect. There are many libraries out there that make certain features easier to use. For example, if you want to implement auto layout constraints in code, there are a lot of libraries that make that easier. These are the two main reasons why you want to look into using third-party code. If you have decided and found a library, how do you actually integrate it into your project? You might feel the urge to copy the source code of the library directly into your project. Typically, this is discouraged. It has a couple of drawbacks. Firstly, it is really hard to update the libraries. Most libraries are updated very frequently, and you should try to integrate the latest version into your project. If you have copied the source code, that means you have to recopy the entire libraries every time a new version is released. Additionally, some libraries need specific project settings. If you just integrate the source code, you will have to apply these project settings manually, which can be a lot of effort. There are better tools out there that allow you to use third-party code without running into these problems. These solutions are called dependency managers. There are currently two important dependency managers for iOS, and we will take a look at COCOAPODS, which is the most popular one. COCOAPODS allows you to create a file called a pod file that specifies the libraries and the versions that you want to integrate into your project. As part of the Mexogram tutorial, we will give you a practical introduction of how to use COCOAPODS, but here at the bottom you can see a little example of a pod file. It is fairly easy to integrate libraries once you know their name. And later in this lecture, we will briefly talk about how to find libraries. Once you have specified this pod file, installing the libraries is only one command line command. You have to run pod install. That will download the libraries and will manipulate your Xcode project to integrate them. The nice thing about COCOAPODS is that it sets up your Xcode project in a way that you can use the libraries right away. How do you typically discover libraries? Use Google and GitHub. If you Google for a certain set of functionality, you mostly will land on a GitHub page that describes a certain library. As part of that GitHub page, you will find instructions on how to integrate the library. One of these instructions will always, or almost always, include a COCOAPODS name. So if you are already using COCOAPODS, you only have to add one line to your pod file to integrate this library. COCOAPODS is really easy to use, and we encourage you to use it to integrate libraries into your project. There is also a second dependency manager, which I want to mention briefly. It's called CARTHAGE. CARTHAGE focuses on Swift dependencies, and it only supports Swift libraries. You can read how to use CARTHAGE on their GitHub page. Typically, most libraries are available through COCOAPODS and through CARTHAGE, so understanding how to use COCOAPODS should be sufficient. However, some newer libraries might only work with CARTHAGE, so you'll have to read through the instructions to integrate them into your project. The most important takeaway of this brief lecture is that you should always take a look at third-party libraries before implementing complex features on your own.